The psychology behind unnecessary purchases. You're scrolling through your phone late at night, maybe unwinding after a stressful day, and you see an ad for something. A gadget, a piece of clothing, some organizing solution that promises to fix a problem you didn't even know you had 5 seconds ago. And suddenly you're clicking through product photos, reading reviews, adding it to your cart. 15 minutes later, you've spent $87 on something that, if you're being honest, you absolutely do not need and probably won't even use more than twice. And the weird part? You knew while you were doing it that you didn't need it. You knew you were making an unnecessary purchase. But you did it anyway, and now it's 11:47 p.m. and you're lying there wondering why you just spent money. You were supposedly saving for something important on a thing you'll probably forget about by the time it arrives. My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about consumer psychology, spending patterns, and specifically why intelligent, self-aware people repeatedly make purchases they know are unnecessary even while they're making them. And what I've discovered is that unnecessary spending isn't really about the stuff we buy. It's about what we're actually trying to accomplish psychologically when we click that buy button. Because nobody wakes up thinking, today I'm going to waste money on things I don't need. But millions of people do it every single day, and the reasons why are way more interesting and complicated than just poor self-control. Because here's what most financial advice gets wrong. It treats unnecessary purchases as a simple discipline problem. Just stop buying stuff you don't need. Make a budget. Stick to it. Use willpower. But that completely misses the point. Unnecessary purchases serve psychological functions. They're meeting needs, just not the needs they appear to be meeting. And until you understand what needs you're spending is actually trying to satisfy, you'll keep making the same purchases over and over while beating yourself up about your lack of discipline. So if you've ever wondered why you keep buying things you don't need, why the resolution to spend less never seems to stick, or why you can be so disciplined in other areas of life but seem to lose control when it comes to spending, this is for you. Because understanding the psychology behind these purchases is the first step to actually changing the pattern. The emotional regulation purchase. Let's start with probably the most common driver of unnecessary purchases, emotion regulation. You had a terrible day at work. Your boss criticized you in a meeting. You're stressed about something in your personal life. You're bored or lonely or anxious or frustrated. And buying something makes you feel better, at least temporarily. This is what psychologists call retail therapy. And it's not a joke. It's a real psychological phenomenon. The act of purchasing triggers a dopamine release in your brain. You feel a little rush of excitement, a sense of control, a momentary relief from whatever negative emotion you were experiencing. For a brief window, you're not stressed about work or worried about your relationship or bored with your routine. You're excited about the thing you just bought. And here's the insidious part. It works. Not long term, obviously. The item arrives, the excitement fades, you're left with the same problems you had before, plus $87 less in your account. But in that moment, it genuinely makes you feel better, which is why you keep doing it. I went through a period a few years ago where I was really stressed about some career stuff, and I started buying books. Not because I had time to read them, I barely had time to sleep. But buying books made me feel like I was doing something productive, like I was investing in myself, like I was the kind of person who reads and learns and grows. The act of purchasing felt like progress, even though I wasn't actually reading anything. I accumulated probably 40 books over 6 months, spent over $600, read maybe 3 of them. But every time I bought one, I got that little hit of feeling like I was taking action, like I was solving something, even though all I was really doing was avoiding the actual hard work of dealing with my career stress. This is the emotional regulation purchase in action, using buying to manage feelings instead of actually addressing the feelings. And the problem is that it creates a cycle. You feel bad, you buy something, you feel better briefly, then you feel worse because you spent money you shouldn't have, so you feel bad again, and the cycle continues. The way out isn't more willpower. It's recognizing what you're actually trying to do, regulate emotion, and finding healthier, cheaper ways to do it. Go for a walk. Call a friend. Journal. Exercise. Actually deal with the stress instead of covering it up with purchasing. But you have to catch yourself in the moment. You have to notice when you're reaching for your phone or opening a shopping app and ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? What am I trying to fix with this purchase? Because once you see the pattern, it becomes much easier to interrupt it. The identity purchase. Here's another big one. We buy things to signal to ourselves and others who we are or who we want to be. This is the psychology behind why someone buys $200 worth of gym clothes before they've worked out once, or why someone buys professional-grade cooking equipment when they can barely make scrambled eggs. The purchase is about identity. You're not buying running shoes, you're buying the identity of being a runner. You're not buying that expensive kitchen gadget, you're buying the identity of being someone who cares about cooking, who values quality, who's becoming the kind of person who makes elaborate meals. And this is powerful because it feels productive. You're investing in becoming a better version of yourself, right? You're setting yourself up for success. How can that be unnecessary? But here's the trap. Buying the stuff associated with an identity doesn't actually give you that identity. The running shoes don't make you a runner. Running makes you a runner. The fancy kitchen equipment doesn't make you a cook. Cooking makes you a cook. But buying the stuff feels like progress without requiring the actual hard work of developing the identity. I know someone who spent over $2,000 on photography equipment, professional camera, multiple lenses, a tripod, editing software, because they wanted to become a photographer. They took maybe 20 photos total. The equipment has been sitting in a closet for 3 years. But at the time of purchase, it felt like they were investing in a new passion, a new skill, a new version of themselves. This is why people's garages and closets are full of barely used hobby equipment. The purchases were about aspiration, about identity, about becoming someone, not about actual need or even actual intention to use the items. The solution isn't to never invest in new interests, it's to separate the identity from the equipment. Want to be a photographer? Use your phone camera for 6 months first. If you're still taking photos consistently after 6 months, then invest in better equipment. Want to be a runner? Run in whatever shoes you have for a few weeks. If you're still running regularly, then buy the nice running shoes. Prove to yourself through behavior that you have or are developing the identity before you buy the stuff associated with it. Otherwise, you're just buying expensive props for a role you're never actually going to play. The optimization trap. This one is sneaky, and it particularly affects people who consider themselves rational, logical types. It's the idea that if you just find the perfect product, it will solve a problem or improve your life in some meaningful way. You spend hours researching the best productivity planner. You read dozens of reviews comparing different noise-canceling headphones. You dive deep into finding the optimal water bottle or the perfect backpack or the most efficient kitchen organization system. And then you buy it, convinced that this is the solution. This is the thing that will finally make you organized or productive or put together. But here's what actually happens. The new planner sits unused after 2 weeks, just like the 3 other planners you bought before it. The fancy headphones don't actually make you more focused. You still procrastinate, just with better audio quality. The organizational system gets ignored after the initial novelty wears off. The trap is believing that external products can solve internal problems, that buying the right thing will compensate for lack of discipline or unclear priorities, or not actually wanting to do the thing you're trying to optimize for. I fell into this hard with productivity tools. I've bought probably a dozen different planners, apps, organizational systems over the years, each time convinced that this was the one that would finally make me consistently productive. And each time, after a brief honeymoon period, I'd revert to my usual patterns because the problem wasn't my tools, it was my habits. The optimization trap is particularly powerful because it feels so reasonable. You're not being frivolous, you're being thoughtful, researching, making informed decisions. You're investing in solutions. Except you're not actually solving anything, you're just buying increasingly expensive band-aids for problems that require behavioral change, not better products. The way out is to test the behavior before optimizing the tool. Want to be more organized? Try being organized with a basic notebook for a month before buying a $60 specialized planner. Want better sound quality? Make sure you're actually using your current headphones regularly before upgrading to the premium ones. And honestly, Sometimes the optimization research itself is the procrastination. You're avoiding actually doing the thing by endlessly researching the perfect way to do the thing. Just start with what you have. Optimize later once you've proven you'll actually stick with it. The scarcity and FOMO driver. Here's one that e-commerce has weaponized brilliantly. Fear of missing out and artificial scarcity. Only 3 left in stock. Sale ends in 2 hours. Limited edition. This price won't last. And suddenly you're feeling urgency about something you weren't even thinking about 5 minutes ago. This taps into a deep psychological principle. We hate losing opportunities more than we enjoy gaining things. The pain of missing out on a good deal feels worse than the pleasure of saving money by not buying something we don't need. So we buy. Not because we need the thing, not even because we particularly want it, but because we might not be able to get it later, or we might have to pay more for it later, and that possibility feels intolerable. Online retailers know this. That's why every website has countdown timers and stock warnings and limited time offers. They're creating artificial urgency to trigger impulsive purchases that wouldn't happen if you had time to actually think about whether you need the item. And it works incredibly well. I've bought so many things during flash sales that I would never have bought at full price, which should tell me something about whether I actually needed them. But in the moment, the deal felt too good to pass up. The scarcity felt real. The FOMO was overwhelming. The counter to this is surprisingly simple. Implement a waiting period. If something is truly a good deal and you truly need it, it will still be a good decision in 24 hours. So make a rule. Any purchase over a certain amount requires a 24-hour waiting period. Add it to your cart, close the browser, come back tomorrow. Most of the time, the urgency will have faded. You'll realize you don't actually need it. You'll see the scarcity for the manipulation it was. And the times you do still want it after 24 hours? Then buy it, knowing you made a considered choice rather than an impulsive reaction to manufactured urgency. The social comparison purchase. We buy things because other people have them and we don't want to be left behind. Your coworker gets a new car, suddenly yours feels old. Your friend renovates their kitchen, suddenly yours feels shabby. You see influencers with their perfect homes and wardrobes, and suddenly everything you own feels inadequate. This is the social comparison purchase, and it's incredibly powerful because it's about belonging and status. We're social creatures. We look to our peer group to understand what's normal, what's expected, what signals success. And when we fall behind those markers, we feel the pressure to catch up. The problem is that this creates an endless arms race where nobody wins. Because someone will always have more, newer, better stuff. You get the thing to keep up with your friends, but then someone else gets an even better version, and now you're behind again. It never ends. And social media has amplified this to an almost unbearable degree. You're not just comparing yourself to your immediate friend group anymore. You're comparing yourself to carefully curated highlight reels from thousands of people, most of whom are either wealthier than you or are also going into debt to maintain an appearance of success. I had a moment of clarity about this when I realized I was considering buying an expensive watch, primarily because I'd noticed that several people I respected wore nice watches, and I'd started feeling self-conscious about my cheap one. Not because I cared about watches, not because I even looked at my watch that often. I mostly checked the time on my phone. But because I'd started equating watch quality with professional success, and I didn't want to seem less successful. That's pure social comparison, and recognizing it for what it was made it much easier to resist. The watch wouldn't actually make me more successful. It would just make me poorer while signaling something that wasn't even true. The antidote to social comparison purchases is to deliberately reduce exposure to the comparison triggers and to get very clear on your own values versus adopted values. Do you actually care about this thing, or do you only care because you've noticed other people have it? Are you buying this for you, or are you buying it for an imagined audience? And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply opt out of the comparison game entirely. Drive a boring car, wear unfashionable clothes. Let other people chase status symbols while you build actual wealth in the background. The cognitive dissonance of sunk cost. Here's a weird one. Sometimes we make unnecessary purchases to justify previous unnecessary purchases. You bought an expensive gym membership, so now you feel like you need to buy workout clothes and supplements and a fitness tracker because if you don't use all the gym stuff, it means you wasted money on the membership. Or you bought a fancy camera, so now you need the lenses and the bag and the editing software because otherwise the camera purchase was pointless. This is sunk cost fallacy in action, but with a spending twist. You're throwing good money after bad because admitting that the first purchase was unnecessary feels too painful. So you double down, spending more, hoping that eventually the total package will justify the initial expense. The rational thing would be to cut your losses. The gym membership was a mistake. Don't compound it by buying more gym stuff you won't use. The camera purchase was impulsive. Don't make it worse with accessories. But humans aren't rational. We want our past decisions to make sense. We want coherence. And so we create it through additional purchases that complete the original one, even though we're just digging the hole deeper. I see this most clearly in hobby purchases. Someone buys equipment for a hobby they think they'll take up. They don't actually pursue the hobby, but instead of accepting that and moving on, they buy additional equipment for that hobby, because now they've invested enough that they have to make it work. Except they still don't actually do the hobby, they just accumulate more stuff. The way out is to get comfortable with sunk costs. The money is gone. Spending more won't bring it back. The question is always, does this new purchase make sense on its own merits, right now, regardless of what I've spent in the past? And usually the answer is no. Breaking free from the pattern. So what do you actually do with all this knowledge? Because understanding the psychology is interesting, but it doesn't automatically change behavior. The first step is just awareness. Start noticing your patterns. When are you most likely to make unnecessary purchases? What emotions or situations trigger it? Are you buying to feel better? To become someone? To keep up with others? To optimize something? Just observe yourself without judgment for a while. Second, implement friction. Make unnecessary purchases slightly harder. Delete shopping apps from your phone. Remove saved payment information from websites. Require yourself to manually enter credit card numbers. These tiny barriers give you just enough pause to interrupt the autopilot purchasing. Third, find alternative solutions for the underlying needs. If you're buying to regulate emotion, develop actual emotional regulation skills. If you're buying for identity, invest time in building skills rather than buying props. If you're buying to keep up with others, work on your internal sense of worth. Fourth, track your spending honestly. Write down every purchase, what it was, and why you bought it. The pattern will become obvious very quickly, and seeing it in black and white makes it much harder to deny. And fifth, give yourself permission to be imperfect. You're going to make unnecessary purchases sometimes. Everyone does. The goal isn't perfection, it's reducing the frequency and increasing awareness. Progress, not perfection. The freedom on the other side. Look, the reason this matters isn't just about saving money, though that's certainly valuable. It's about freedom. Every unnecessary purchase is a choice to trade future freedom for present gratification. And making that choice occasionally is fine. Making it constantly, unconsciously, driven by psychological patterns you don't understand, that's what keeps you stuck. When you break free from unnecessary purchasing patterns, something interesting happens. You start to see possessions differently. They stop being solutions to psychological needs and start being just stuff. Useful sometimes, nice to have when they serve a purpose, but not essential to your well-being or identity or status. And that shift is liberating. You walk through stores without feeling the pull. You scroll past ads without clicking. You see other people's stuff without feeling inadequate. You're just free from the constant, low-level anxiety that you need more things to be okay. The psychology behind unnecessary purchases is complex and deeply human. We're not broken for doing this. We're just trying to meet legitimate psychological needs through a mechanism that doesn't actually work long-term. And once we see that clearly, we can start finding better ways to meet those needs. Ways that don't drain our bank accounts and fill our homes with stuff we don't use. So the next time you find yourself about to click Buy Now on something you don't need, pause. Ask yourself what you're really trying to accomplish, and then see if there's a better way to get there. More often than not, there is.